You're alive because your species almost didn't make it. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Humanity came within heartbeats of complete extinction. And not just from wars or accidents, from nature itself, from diseases, from climate catastrophe, from forces so powerful that they nearly erased us from existence. This is how we survived the unsurvivable. Let's start with the scariest part. All 8 billion of you came from almost nothing. Scientists call it the genetic bottleneck. Around 75,000 years ago, something happened that terrified our ancestors into near oblivion. We don't know exactly what. Maybe a volcanic eruption, maybe a climate shift, maybe a combination of disasters. But the evidence is undeniable. At that moment, the global human population crashed to between 3,000 and 10,000 people. Think about that. All of humanity, every single human alive today, every person you've ever met or will meet. We all descend from 3,000 to 10,000 people. That's not a city. That's barely a small town. One more bad winter, one more plague, one more catastrophe, and human history ends before it begins. Scientists look at our DNA and see the proof. We have less genetic diversity than many endangered animal species. We're more genetically similar to each other than most animals that have tens of millions of individuals. Why? Because we bottlenecked. We collapsed. We almost died out completely. But we didn't. Those survivors kept going. They had no idea how close extinction was. They just hunted. They gathered. They had children. They survived. And in surviving, they saved humanity's entire future. Then came the ice ages. Not one. Multiple ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Imagine temperatures dropping. Imagine ice sheets miles thick covering entire continents. Imagine food disappearing. Imagine darkness and cold that you've never experienced. Humans adapted. We mastered clothing from animal hides. We controlled fire to stay warm and cook meat. We moved to follow migrating herds. We learned to hunt bigger animals with better spears and strategy. We pushed into new territories. We split into different populations across different continents. And we survived. But survival was never guaranteed. In places like Europe and Asia, humans faced megafauna, woolly mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, giant cave bears, animals that could kill you instantly, animals that hunted in packs, animals that were stronger and faster and more dangerous than anything we face today. We were prey. Our ancestors fought them with nothing but spears and rocks and intelligence, and they won. Not through strength, through cleverness, through strategy, through cooperation. Then the ice ages ended. The climate shifted. The megafauna disappeared. But a new threat emerged. Disease. Tuberculosis is one of the oldest killers in human history. Archaeologists found it in mummified remains from 5,000 years ago. TB has killed roughly 1 billion humans across all of history. 1 billion. For centuries, it was the leading cause of death in the Western world. It killed entire families. It killed communities. It ravaged populations. And humans had no treatment. No antibiotics. No medicine. Nothing. But populations adapted through natural selection. Some people carried genetic variations that gave them resistance. Some had immune systems that fought off infection more effectively. These genetic advantages weren't common. But over centuries, in populations heavily exposed to tuberculosis, people with those protective genes survived more often and had more children. Their descendants inherited those genes, not immunity. This wasn't individual adaptation. This was evolution. The gene pool shifted. Brutal. Merciless, but effective. But nothing prepared humanity for the Black Death. This wasn't just a disease, this was apocalypse. Around 1350, plague swept across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Bubonic plague, pneumonic plague, septicemic plague. Multiple forms of the same bacterial infection, and it killed without mercy. Entire villages were wiped out, entire cities emptied. In Europe, somewhere between 25 and 50% of the entire population died. 50%. Imagine walking through a city, and 1 out of every 2 people you see is already dead or dying. Imagine burying your entire family in a single month. Imagine being orphaned. Imagine starving because everyone who grew food is dead. The mortality rate in some places was unimaginable. Whole regions that were thriving became ghost towns. The population of Europe didn't recover for 200 years. 2 centuries to recover from the death toll, but we survived, not through medicine, through genetics and luck and stubbornness. The people who lived through the plague were survivors, their descendants were naturally more resistant, and the plague eventually burned itself out because it killed its hosts faster than it could spread. That's the brutal mathematics of plague. It's so deadly that it kills people before they can spread it far enough. Eventually, the infection runs through a population and stops. The survivors inherit the earth. With the age of exploration came catastrophe. Europeans arrived in the Americas, and they brought diseases that the indigenous populations had never encountered. Smallpox, measles, typhus, influenza. Diseases that were common in Europe and Asia. Diseases that populations there had adapted to over millennia. But in the Americas, they were alien, devastating, apocalyptic. The indigenous populations had no immunity, no resistance, no genetic advantage. Diseases wiped out entire civilizations. Some historians estimate that 90 to 95% of the Native American population died from disease alone. Not from war, not from conquest, from illness. It was genocide by microscope. But humanity survived. The populations that remained did recover. The survivors had personal immunity from having fought the infection. Their children born after the epidemic didn't inherit that immunity biologically, but they lived in a world where the worst epidemic had passed. Over time, societies rebuilt, populations stabilized, generations were born who never knew the apocalypse their ancestors faced. Not quickly, not without massive suffering, but they survived. Progress created new horrors. The Industrial Revolution packed humans into cities, into factories, into tenements where thousands of people lived on top of each other in filth and poverty. Disease ran rampant. Cholera, typhoid, typhus, pneumonia, dysentery, diseases of poverty and overcrowding. Cholera came in waves, pandemics that swept across continents. Entire cities would be struck down simultaneously. People died so quickly that they couldn't bury the bodies fast enough. The stench of death filled entire districts, thousands dying in days, and people had no idea what caused it. They thought it was something in the air. They thought it was bad luck. They thought it was God's punishment. Then a man named John Snow looked at a map of London during a cholera outbreak. He mapped where the dead lived, and he noticed something. They all lived near the same water pump. One pump on Broad Street. He convinced authorities to remove the pump, and the outbreak stopped. The cause was contaminated. Water, not air, not God. Water. That discovery saved millions of lives. It led to sewage systems, to water treatment, to sanitation. Humans figured out how to survive disease not through genetics, but through understanding and innovation. For centuries, smallpox was one of the most deadly diseases on Earth. It killed millions. It left survivors disfigured and blind. It swept through populations like plague. Entire royal families were wiped out. Entire armies were decimated. Smallpox determined the outcome of wars. It shaped history. But in 1796, a man named Edward Jenner did something revolutionary. He noticed that milkmaids who got cowpox seemed immune to smallpox. He took pus from a cowpox victim and deliberately infected a child with it. The child got sick, then recovered. Then, when exposed to actual smallpox, the child didn't get sick. Vaccination was born. It took time, took resistance, took skepticism. But eventually, vaccination against smallpox spread. Over centuries, the disease was slowly eliminated, country by country, region by region. By 1980, smallpox was gone, completely eradicated. The deadliest disease in human history was eliminated through science and determination. That was proof that humans could overcome even the most devastating illnesses, that we could think our way out of extinction, that innovation could save lives where nature had only brought death. In 1918, the Spanish flu struck. Right after World War I ended, the world was crowded, soldiers were moving, hygiene was terrible. And a new strain of influenza emerged that was devastatingly lethal. It infected 500 million people worldwide. That's 30% of the entire global population. 50 to 100 million people died. Some estimates say more. In a single year. In a single year, more people died of flu than in 4 years of World War I. Young people, healthy people, people who should have survived. They got sick and died within days. Entire families were wiped out. Entire towns were empty. Mass graves were dug because there was no other way to handle the bodies. And we had no vaccine, no antibiotic, nothing. Just quarantine and hope and prayer. People wore masks. They avoided crowds. They isolated themselves. Some survived. Most who got sick recovered, but enough died to send shockwaves through civilization. And then it stopped. The virus burned itself out. The survivors had immunity, but immunity doesn't pass genetically. What survived was the population itself. The people who recovered lived on, and humanity moved on. Then came the 20th century. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes. These weren't infectious diseases. These were the diseases of aging and lifestyle. Humans started living longer, living healthier, and the diseases that killed us changed. We developed insulin for diabetes. We developed surgery and medication for heart disease. We developed chemotherapy and radiation for cancer. Not perfect, not always successful, but effective. By mid-century, a new terror emerged: polio, a viral disease that paralyzed children, that crippled entire populations, that left survivors in iron lungs, unable to breathe on their own. Polio terrified the world. Summer meant polio season. Parents kept children inside. Beaches were closed. Schools were shut down. The fear was immense. Then, in 1955, Jonas Salk developed the polio vaccine. He tested it on millions of people. It worked. Polio cases dropped dramatically, then nearly to zero, then to almost nothing. Countries that had thousands of polio cases a year went years without a single case. Another devastating disease nearly eliminated. In the modern era, a new plague emerged: HIV and AIDS, a disease that seemed unstoppable. In the 1980s, people were dying of a mysterious illness. They got sick with infections that their bodies couldn't fight. They wasted away. They died, and nobody knew how to stop it. Then they found the virus, HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. It attacked the immune system itself. It was devastating. It was terminal, and it spread through sexual contact and blood. It ravaged populations. It killed millions, and there was no cure. But humans fought back. Scientists around the world collaborated. They developed antiretroviral drugs, not a cure, but medication that could suppress the virus, slow its progression, give people decades of life instead of just years. People who should have died in 1990 were still alive in 2000, in 2010, in 2020, living with the virus but not dying from it. 2 decades later came COVID-19, a new coronavirus, a new viral threat that tested everything humanity had learned, and the world shut down. Economies crashed. People died by the millions. Hospitals overflowed. Corpses piled up. And fear was everywhere. But this time, humans responded faster than ever before. Scientists around the world collaborated in real time. They shared data. They shared samples. They raced to develop a vaccine. Not a vaccine developed over years. A vaccine developed in months, using new technology called mRNA. Never used before on this scale. Never tested on this many people. And it worked. It was safe. It was effective. It was deployed to billions of people. Did it save millions of lives? Almost certainly. Would millions more have died without it? Almost certainly. We don't know for sure because we can't rewrite history, but the number is probably in the millions. Humanity survived another plague. Look at the pattern. Look at what we've overcome. Bottlenecks that almost erased us. Ice ages that destroyed our food sources. Megafauna that hunted us for sport. Tuberculosis that killed for 5,000 years. Plague that wiped out entire continents. Smallpox that killed hundreds of millions. Spanish flu that killed more than World War. New diseases that emerge and threaten everything. And every single time we adapted. We innovated. We survived. We survived not through individual strength. No human is stronger than a mammoth. We survived through collective intelligence, through cooperation, through sharing knowledge, through building on what previous generations learned, through refusing to give up even when extinction seemed certain. We've developed vaccines. We've built sewage systems. We've invented antibiotics. We've created medicines that work miracles. We've shared knowledge across the globe. We've trained billions of people to recognize symptoms and seek treatment. We've built hospitals and clinics and research centers in almost every country on Earth. And here's the wildest part. Every single time we thought we'd conquered disease, a new one emerged. Humans didn't just develop immunity to existing threats, we created entirely new capabilities to fight entirely new threats. We went from not knowing diseases existed to mapping their genetics, from having no treatment to having targeted medications, from being helpless to being powerful. That's evolution. Not just genetic evolution, cultural evolution, technological evolution, the evolution of human knowledge and capability. Your ancestors faced extinction and refused it. Multiple times, they passed on their genes, they passed on their knowledge, they passed on their determination. And that's why you're here today. That's why 8 billion humans walk the earth. You're not here by accident. You're here because your species developed a superpower. Not the power to be stronger, not the power to be faster, the power to adapt, the power to learn, the power to cooperate, the power to innovate when facing extinction. We survived a genetic bottleneck that should have ended humanity. We survived ice ages that should have frozen us out. We survived plagues that killed half the planet. We survived diseases that had kill rates of 90%. We survived conquest and war and famine and suffering on scales that are hard to comprehend. And we're still here, still multiplying, still spreading, still fighting against the forces that would kill us, still learning, still innovating, still refusing to give up. That's the real legacy of our species, not our wars, not our politics, not our culture, our survival, our stubborn refusal to go extinct, our ability to look death in the face and find a way forward anyway. Every single person you meet is the product of countless survivors, countless ancestors who faced death and kept going, countless people who got sick and recovered, countless people who adapted and had children and passed on their genes. You carry their survival in your DNA. You carry their determination in your spirit. The next extinction threat is coming. It always is. Maybe it's climate change, maybe it's a new pandemic, maybe it's something we haven't thought of yet, but humans will face it, and will adapt, and will innovate, and will find a way to survive, because that's what we do. That's who we are. We're the species that survives. That's not arrogance. That's history. That's the story of how you got here. That's the truth written in every cell of your body. Every ancestor you descend from survived the unsurvivable, and so will you. So will we. That's the real story of humanity. If you enjoyed the video, then like it and subscribe for more interesting human history. Thanks for watching.